Everybody, it is 11 o'clock. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Remember, this is broadcast live on the website and archived for any sad people that want to watch it later. Remember to switch your microphone on to speak and off when you're done. Apologies, we don't have any. Minutes. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2022 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Deborah?
I'll second that.
All happy? Thank you. Urgent items, we have none. Declarations of interest. I presume there's some Charnwood people here which want to declare on Charnwood Borough plan. So I've got down Mrs. Radford, Mrs. Taylor and Mr. Shepherd who are declaring on Charnwood local plan. No others. Oh, and you, Pam, which one? You, Charnwood, Melton?
Melton.
Melton local plan. You got that? Okay. Can't see it on the agenda, but. Which item, Pam?
Not sure there is one.
There isn't one. Okay, thank you. MTFS, Medium Term Financial Strategy 23-24 to 26-27. This is on pages 9 to 294. This has been for consideration. Okay, so we had a look at this in December 2022. We've consulted, including the overview and scrutiny bodies, and we've now got the final receipt of the local government settlement. The comments from the overview and scrutiny bodies are set out in the Appendix Q to this report. Please note we've also received comments from Simon linked to agenda item 6 on the agenda, and a copy of these comments is attached to the order paper marked 4. Subject to Cabinet's approval, the MTFS obviously goes to full council on the 22nd of February for final approval. Chris Tambini is with us. He's the Director of Corporate Resources. He'll present the report, and then I shall go straight to Lee, the lead cabinet member for resources, to speak. Okay, Chris, over to you.
Thank you. This is a long report, but I'm just going to focus on a few areas. There have been some changes to the budget that was issued for consultation in December, and these are set out in paragraph 32. I'm not going to go through them all, but I will point out that we have included a £1 million savings contingency, which will allow service reductions included in the budget to be reviewed in the early part of the next financial year. All the changes amount to a slight improvement in our overall financial position. And actually, since this report's been published, we've now received the final local government finance settlement, which actually did include an extra 99,000 of extra funding, which is small, but it is welcome. The key aspects of the budget that were considered by the Cabinet in December, including the proposed council tax increase of 4.99, and that does include the social care levy, are principally unchanged from that received by Cabinet in December. So just a kind of a reminder of the overall position. The budget is balanced for next year, but after that a gap does open up. So the gap in 24-25 is 13 million, and I think that does look manageable with the appropriate financial discipline. But thereafter, a very large budget gap does open up. But clearly, in years 3 and 4 of the MTFS, there's a lot of uncertainty. So I want to make a bit of a comment on that uncertainty. Clearly, it's very difficult to forecast past the general election. But the funding for public service is ultimately dependent on a growing economy and a healthy tax receipts, whoever is in power. I think most commentators that I've read anyway seem to indicate that getting the economy growing at a reasonable rate over the medium term is going to be pretty tough. So probably the prediction is that the pressure on public finances is going to remain over the life of the MTFS. So I think that financial discipline that we've shown in terms of this budget and in previous years is going to be very important. And that's especially true because we do remain the lowest funded county council. I think Cabinet does know that we do face significant cost and demand pressures, especially in relation to children and adult social care, and clearly SEN continues to be a major pressure. And just a reminder of a couple of the figures. So over the next 4 years, we think extra demand for services is going to cost in the order of £70 million, and the inflationary pressures are going to be about 110 million, so very, very large pressures. The budget includes £37 million of identified savings, and this is on top of the 200 million plus we made since 2010. But clearly that savings figure is going to have to rise to in order to address those budget gaps I mentioned in years 2, 3 and 4 of the MTFS. I would like to end with a bit of a positive, that despite the pressure, we have got a deliverable balanced budget for next year, and there are kind of pretty limited service reductions as well within there. The County Council does continue to have a strong balance sheet, which I think is going to be very, very important given the significant risks it faces over the medium term.
Thank you, Chris. Lee?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank Scrutiny and Simon Golden for their comments that they've included in today's pack. It's good to see that they've made comments. Setting a balanced budget doesn't get any easier. Austerity was bad enough, but at least we knew what was coming. The national finances are not in great shape, so our settlement still leaves us locally with tough choices. While it's disappointing that fair funding has been delayed again, we will continue to pursue any initiatives that helps Leicestershire. The public consultation result showed a good understanding of our position by the population of Leicestershire, and that despite the impact of inflation on household finances, 53% were in favour of an increase of 3% or more for the core amount, and 51% of the population and respondents supported an increase of 2% or more in the adult social care precept. It was also good to see that 92% backed the continued push that we have for fair funding and support the proposed council tax increase of 5% was also indicated as being very strong. I'm pleased that a date has now been set for our meeting with the Chancellor, and I'd like to put on record my thanks and our thanks to the Leicestershire's MPs for making this happen. Despite the uncertainty, we've continued to produce a 4-year plan. This is vital if we are to continue making the best decisions for Leicestershire possible with the demanding financial position. The settlement was slightly better than estimated at the time of the draft MTFS, and while most of the additional money needs to go to reducing the deficit, I am pleased to say that we have been able to find £1 million to lower the levels of service reductions we need to make. I'm sure members will agree that having some flexibility will be welcome as we go through the various consultation processes. The public have services we provide which are not statutory, which they like and do not want to see them reduced. Something that we strive to do is find a balance between the services that we must provide to vulnerable people and those that the wider population benefit from. I am pleased to announce that we have allocated another £500,000 to highways maintenance, which is one of the services that our residents expect and depend on. This is fully funded from the additional £100,000 received from the final settlement and £400,000 not expected to be required in the next financial year from the £1 million that we have identified to reduce the impact of service reductions. The budget deficit is larger than I would like, and when we get to 25-26, it is a lot larger. But we have given ourselves the best possible chance of success by planning ahead. The levels of savings required are not what any of us want to see, but it will allow the maximum levels of resources to be directed at those residents that need our services most. It is important to state that as an administration, we recognise that many residents will be having a hard time with the cost of living increases, and we need to repay them by continuing to deliver the services efficiently and effectively. Over the next 4 years, Leicestershire County Council will need to save £150 million, of which £37 million has been identified for our services, and £25 million of cost avoidance. £88 million still needs to be identified as part of a range of initiatives to close the financial gap. It is always regrettable to have to raise council tax, but in reality, there's little choice in the matter. Without these additional resources, essential services would suffer. The proposal we've made is for a core council tax rise of 2.99% plus the 2% for adult social precept, which totals 4.99%. This equates to £6.04 a month for a Band D property and will generate an extra £17.5 million per annum, primarily to be invested in supporting our vulnerable people. Going forward, we'll need to be innovative in identifying sources of funding for our capital projects going forward, and including working with planning authorities and developers to ensure the infrastructure required to support both economic and housing growth is fully funded, and we have to ensure that we also maintain our resources that we do have to meet this challenge. Fellow Cabinet members, the MTFS today is a year in the making. It is a constant process. I would like to thank Chris, Declan and the whole team for the work that is needed to bring this here today for your recommendations. So, Chairman, I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 9, paragraph 2 of the agenda pack, labelled A to R. Thank you.
Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to second what Lee has moved. Chris and Lee have said everything very, very clearly. I will just repeat the thanks that I think all of us feel towards Chris and his team for the immense amount of work that goes into producing this budget in these challenging times. So on behalf of the public and behalf of members, to Chris and his team, thank you.
Peter, thank you. Richard, thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I've said it before, but I'll reiterate it again. The government really needs to recognise the pressures that local government is under, particularly regarding the pressures from transportation, special educational needs, all those pressures on our budgets, and recognise actually we need a fairer settlement here. I mean, in my view, governments of all different colours have treated local government badly over the years as the poorer cousin, and that needs to change, really. That attitude needs to change. I think as Chris alluded to, I mean, the key really, in my view, is growth. The government needs to grow the pie or the cake, whatever your preference, sweet or savoury. So we get a larger slice, a fairer slice of that resource, because, you know, we're the ones at the front line delivering the services that our residents need. And, you know, I really would implore our members of parliament and government to listen to the pressures that we're under to ensure that we do get the fairer funding that we need. But also, we as administration, I see, we're taking with the adults in the room, we're taking the difficult decisions. You know, I really do hope that when this budget goes to full council, the opposition groups will vote to set a balanced budget rather than oppose or abstain. They'll take the grown-up approach and look that we need to balance our books to ensure that we can continue to deliver for our residents and support setting a balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Deborah.
Thank you, Peter. I couldn't agree more with some of the comments that he's made there. I just want to raise some issues with the children and family services. So the savings we've got to make is 12.6 million, and this includes 9.2 million from the Defining Children and Family Service for the Future programme, phases 1 and 2, and that's looking at a programme of work to improve outcomes for children, young people and their families, whilst also delivering significant financial savings. To say that's a tough job to do, it is incredibly difficult to try and find those savings. Our high needs budget, just reiterate, we're 10 million short of our spend each year, and we continue to increase our deficit year on year. It's a position that we can't continue to do, and we're working with our colleagues from Newton Europe to address this issue, but we're also working with the Department for Education within their Delivering Better Value programme. This is not an issue that's going to go away, and we will continue to lobby the government about the changes needed to support this sector. There is some hope on the horizon with the consultation that's now gone up looking at social care and the reviews that were done about the serious difficulties about Arthur and Star that were murdered by their families. So there is some work out there that's coming through and looking to change the sector, but we need that to happen and much more quickly than government are planning at the moment. So we will continue to push the government there. And I think the significant element of our worsening position is the continued rate of growth in children that need support and the more complex issues we have for children. And I think we're now finally starting to see the outcome of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns for our children and families. That is definitely starting to rise with the children that need our support going forward. So, you know, that's something that's not going to go away very soon either. So the TISL programme, our Transferring Send and Inclusion in Leicestershire, still focusing on the change to the whole send system to ensure that our children with special education needs and disabilities have their needs met at the right time, in the right place and with the right support. And that's an ongoing programme that we're looking at over the next 4 years. And by that timescale of delivery, the benefits reflect the complexity of the system change that we need to achieve them. But I just want to end on a positive note. I think while I've been in the position, I've continued to raise the profile of children and families locally, regionally and nationally whenever I can about the support we need for our children. And we finally got some good news that we've been given £1 million for family hubs to progress that from the government. And we're one of only 12 councils in the country to receive that. So I'm really pleased that Leicester have been given that. And that's going to enable us to create some more online support and local hubs to support our families. So I'm really pleased that we have finally been listened to and we have got some money coming into us for children and families.
Christine.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as other departments, we're under pressure, and I must thank all the departments for working to give us quite a good balanced budget in certain areas. And yes, we're working very hard, and as everybody knows, the adults we're getting older residents and needing more needs. And yes, I thank the department, and we're working hard to keep it that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So it was moved by Lee and seconded by Richard, and this obviously goes to full council for final approval. And I want to reinforce what Peter Bedford said, that we've spent a lot of work on, a lot of time on this. It's not been approached in a random manner, it's logical. And it ticks all the boxes in terms of balancing the budget for the years going forward. And I put on record my thanks to you, Chris, for the work you and your team have done on this budget, and I think it'll probably be your last one for you move to pastures new. But so thank you very much. So when it goes to full council, what we expect from the opposition is obviously a sensible debate on the budget, and the budget is 500 odd million pounds. What I don't expect is just them picking on some minor particular issue just to fill up a focus leaflet. You know, the budget is more than just a single line or a single route or a single item. It is a whole budget, and it has taken a lot of work. And we've made some tough decisions as a Conservative administration, going for a 4.99% increase, which is not something that was particularly popular in the entire group, because everybody knows that everybody's short of money. So I just urge the Liberals to try and talk about the budget in general, not just something they want to stick in some random focus leaflet in parts of Hinckley. These are huge numbers we're dealing with here. There's huge risks, and we've got to make huge savings. But as leader, I can say to the people who may watch this that we will deliver, and we will honour our manifesto commitment. And you've heard from Deborah and Christine that we will protect the vulnerable. And then above and beyond that, we're actually going to fill some more blessed potholes, which is something that fills up my my post bag. So I'm happy to support the motion going to full council. So we need a proper show of hands, and so the camera can record it. So moved by Lee, seconded by Richard, all in favour. Okay, I think it caught that. Hope the Liberals caught my message as well. Doubt if they did, but I only asked them. Investing in Leicestershire Programme Strategy 23 to 27. This is pages 295 to 336. The report seeks our approval for the Investing in Leicestershire Strategy Programme, I've said, which sets out the proposed approach to future asset management and acquisitions, the terms of reference for investing in the Leicestershire Programme Board. The Investing in Leicestershire Programme Board, previously known as the Corporate Asset Fund. So what we've now got the ILP rather than the CAIF. We've had to change. John Bennett will explain to you why I've had to change in a minute. Scrutiny's had a look at this, the Commission on 30th of January, a draft minutes is attached to order paper mark 5. So I'll say we've got John Bennett here, Head of Strategic Property. He'll present the report and maybe explain why we're now the ILP, not the CAIF. And then I'll go over to Lee, who is type of in charge of this, and then Richard to second. John, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, everybody. Today I'd like to take the Cabinet through some of the changes to what was the Corporate Asset Investment Fund and the reasoning behind those changes. As can be seen from paragraphs 8 through to 11, the fund was set up in 2014 and the income generated from that was helping to support frontline services. Each iteration of the strategy of the fund has ensured that its priorities align with the most up-to-date strategic plan and outcomes of the County Council. Paragraphs 16 through 21 give more background to the history of the fund, but I draw Cabinet's attention to paragraphs 22 through 31. It is in these paragraphs that the reason for the revision of the strategy can be found. Cabinet will be aware that some local authorities in England have borrowed excessively to generate income on the margin difference between the low interest rate provided by the Public Works Lending Board, PWLB, and the income generated from property investments. This behaviour has led to the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA, to review its prudential code, and also for HM Treasury to issue further guidance on its lending through the PWLB. Paragraphs 28 and 29 summarise the current position, which is that the fund should be clear that its primary objective is not raising income from its property assets, but the primary objective should be developing or investing for the purposes of service delivery, housing, regeneration, and addressing areas of economic or social market failure, and renewable energy generation. Therefore, commercial development schemes on county council land can still progress, because these developments will provide jobs and economic growth. Also, the renewable energy schemes, both solar and wind, are allowable forms of investment under both the SIPFA Code and HM Treasury guidance, because as well as being allowable forms of development in themselves, they are actions which are satisfying policy objectives of the County Council following its declaration of a climate emergency in 2019. Whilst the property investments that have been acquired by the County Council, such as the office developments in Lichfield and Nottingham, do not have to be sold, we will not be making any further investments in line with the guidance and the code. If any investment was seen to be breaching these codes and guidance, then the County Council would be unable to borrow from the PWLB for a period of 3 years. So it's very important that no such breaches occur. Paragraphs 32 to 37 outline the strategy from 23 to 27, which we'll now be seeking to achieve. And Cabinet will note, as has been mentioned, the suggested name change from the Corporate Asset Investment Fund to Investing in Leicestershire programme. It is thought that this more accurately reflects the way in which the council invests in and uses its property assets for the betterment of the county. A draft of this strategy was presented to the Scrutiny Commission at the end of last month, and there's a couple of points raised from that, namely that the pressures remain and the investment fund therefore remained relevant to the council's MTFS. Fund has been a success and it's generating over £7 million in revenue. We have been prudent and never borrowed to support the CAFE investments, having been funded from underspends. And the fund's been robust and performed well despite the pandemic and economic pressures arising from the war in Ukraine and rising inflation costs. And importantly, the County Council's external auditors have never raised any issues or concerns regarding the CAFE since its inception. The investment appraisal process outlined in the strategy includes all costs and income, so a 7% target is still sought from any development or other investments made through the programme. And sites purchased and ongoing developments held in the CAFE will be unaffected, as I mentioned, by the change in the SIPFA rules. So schemes such as Airfield Farm and Leaders Farm will not only generate a future income, but provide jobs and regeneration in the area as permitted. Recommendations as per the order paper. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Investments we have continued to perform well, although in the short term capital values will undoubtedly come under pressure. Several councils have got into trouble with some high risk investments and questionable governance. Leicestershire County Council have not. In response to some of the activity by other councils with the SIPFA tightening the rules around investments and borrowing, our strategy is now being updated to reflect these changes so that we continue to be compliant. You've heard about the change of name, and I really think the Investing in Leicestershire programme says what it states and does what it says on the can. I know the pace of investments is slower than some members would like, but I'm comfortable that this gives us the right balance of being well managed and delivering benefits for the authority. Whilst the goals of CAFE were always wider than the financial return, the new branding really sets the tone for officers, for John and his team to maximise the contribution to the council's wider objectives. I would just like to put on record my thanks to John and his team, and also to Chris and Declan for all the work they do in this invaluable programme for Leicestershire County Council, as it really does make a difference. So, Chairman, I'm happy to move the recommendations, the two recommendations on page 295 of the agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I second what Lee has moved. CAFE has served us well. I hope ILP will serve us well. And John has explained very carefully indeed why the change of name is needed. And I think we should emphasise how prudent we've been in the past with CAFE. And I hope ILP will go on being successful for this council. So I'm happy, very happy indeed, to second what Lee has moved.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. So all in favour of going to ILP and getting rid of CAFE? Thank you. Thank you. 6, Passenger Transport Policy and Strategy 337 to 3370. This concerns the recommencement of the review of all the council-supported passenger transport services against the Passenger Transport Policy and Strategy following the pause while services were affected during the pandemic. The Cabinet is asked to approve the planned programme for local engagement and or consultation with communities which will be affected. We've had comments from Amanda and Max. These are on the order paper marked 6. We've got Anne Carruthers, the Director of Environment and Transport, here to present the report. Then I'll be going straight to Ozzy, who's in charge of it. Anne.
Thank you, Leader, and I'll ask for just a few minutes of patience while I bring out the main points in the report for your consideration. Late in 2018, Cabinet approved what we call our PTPS, Passenger Transport Policy and Strategy. This supported the process of assessing the Council's subsidised bus services against a set criteria to ensure that we are achieving most effective use of our limited budgets when we're providing those services. This review process was ongoing when the pandemic started. However, it was paused at that point for obvious reasons. Key matters that have emerged and changed since that time comes into this wider consideration. DfT's National Bus Strategy was issued. In line with that, we have established an enhanced partnership in Leicestershire with the bus operators, and we also bid for bus service improvement funding from government. Unfortunately, like the majority of local authorities nationally, we were unsuccessful in securing that funding. Bus patronage has also been hit during that time and even now has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels. And on top of that, we've seen increased costs, both labour and fuel, which obviously impacts the industry as well. To help during the pandemic, government did provide bus recovery funding. In Leicestershire, we re-tendered our bus services on a like-for-like basis for a 2-year period to give some stability to the market during that difficult time. The continuing challenges, however, of the market has meant that we saw significant increases in the contract costs. And for the coming financial year, we have a £1 million budget deficit to provide those like-for-like services. In addition, and subject to MTFS approval, we have a further 200,000 saving to make against this budget. So that's the context in which we're bringing this proposal to you today. The current situation is driving the need to restart the process of those service reviews on our existing subsidised services. Early work to collect baseline data and evidence began last September. And we have produced a timetable in 4 batches of reviewing our services over the coming 12 to 18 months. It isn't a quick process. The assessment itself considers net subsidy per passenger kilometre, the availability of alternative bus services, or a local centre within 800 metres walking, and finally journey purpose, and we'll come on to that. Given the time that's passed since we devised the policy and strategy and the assessment criteria in the first place, which, 2018, we commissioned an independent review to ensure that this is still relevant now. This review concluded that the policy and strategy was generally compatible with both the BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan that we have for the county, and our enhanced partnership, and therefore fit for purpose at this time. It's worth highlighting and just reminding Cabinet there are 3 possible outcomes when we carry out a review of a service, because often the immediate assumption, and just looking at the media recently as well, that would back that up. The perception is that a bus service will automatically be withdrawn. That is not the case. There are 3 potential outcomes. The first one is it's a good value case. The subsidy remains, the bus service remains as is. The second outcome is there's some element of change because we can then reduce costs through either frequency, hours of operation, routing, etc. So a service will still exist, but perhaps in a different form, but offers better value for the limited funding we have. Or the third option is a withdrawal of that subsidy. Now, there's 2 scenarios to that one. First one, that subsidy has been withdrawn because there's an alternative bus service for residents. Or secondly, because it's very poor value, but there's not an alternative. In those cases, we will look to put on a demand responsive transport service to take those residents of that community to the nearest local centre with those essential services, which are the likes of medical and food shopping. And from that centre, there's usually then options to interchange onto other bus services into bigger centres. Paragraphs 45 to 48 set out the legal considerations, and the key point I would highlight is the authority's statutory duty is to consider transport provision to meet public transport requirements that are not met by other means, i.e. the private sector. That does not necessarily mean it needs to be a bus rather than a DRT, a demand responsive transport service. So worth just bearing that one in mind as well. Where communities are affected, I would remind Cabinet that our 26 subsidised services represent less than 10% of the county's bus market. So 90% is commercial at the current time. As the leaders already indicated, the Labour group have submitted comments, including requesting our full refresh of the passenger transport policy and strategy. I've already covered there that we did have an independent review, and that has concluded the policy is fit for purpose at this time. The point's also made that the case-by-case review loses the strategic direction and will not consider wider impacts. Again, in that context of our services, subsidised ones are less than 10% of the overall network. Again, I wouldn't support that point in terms of loss of strategic direction. While important to those communities affected, of course, the overall impact, therefore, I think in the wider network will be small. Another point raised regarded developer contributions to bus-related infrastructure, and I would just reassure Cabinet that we do and we will continue to, where merited, ask for bus infrastructure in relation to developer contributions in Section 106 agreements. Mr Galton has submitted comments asking Cabinet not to implement further reduction in the budget and to utilise the 1 million available for subsidising buses. I would just come back to pointing out that actually this isn't reducing a budget, this is getting it back to its original budget. We have £1 million growth over budget for the coming year. And equally, in applying that 1 million, if Cabinet did choose to allocate it, all we're doing is putting off these reviews for another 12 months because it's one-off funding. And during that time, we will be continuing to subsidise, in some cases, often very poor value cases. Services. And again, there's a question there about use of a limited funding. Mr Galton also raises a point of lifeline services and puts forward the case that Service 747 has previously been reviewed and offered good value for money, therefore should not be reviewed again. Fundamentally, however, we need to be looking at across the board in an equitable status given current data and the current position. So all services should be reviewed. If it has a strong case, it will continue with the subsidy, as I've mentioned before. Finally then, Cabinet are asked to note the recommencement of the review of our 26 services over the next 12 to 18 months to improve the programme of engagement proposed for affected communities and intended course of action, depending on the outcome, obviously, the review comes up with. And finally, to enable delegation to myself as Director in consultation with Cabinet lead to implement those outcomes. Thank you, Chair.
Working. Well, before I call Ozzy, you mentioned independent review. Can you just elaborate more on independent review? And also, I noticed there's 26 services. That's a very small percentage of the bus services in the county, isn't it?
The 26 are less than 10% of the county's bus network, yes, so it is a small percentage. In terms of the independent review, we commissioned independent consultants and asked them to look at that, to give the challenge across, you know, where we are now, where we were then, is this still fit for purpose? So external to the organisation.
Good, thank you. I'll go to Ozzy first. Then if Ozzy moves something, I'll formally second something. Then I'll come to you, Blake. Ozzy.
Thank you, Leader. You will have heard that Anne has clearly explained and gone through the passenger transport policy and strategy. I completely understand that bus users and operators will have concerns about the proposals to review the service. However, the harsh reality is that we need to reduce our spend within our subsidised bus network. We annually subsidise 26 supported services, ranging from £40,000 to a massive over £200,000 per year per service. We have a high number of services which an average passenger subsidy is between £8 and £22 per journey made for that journey. That is just not sustainable. I want to make it absolutely clear that no decisions have been made yet about any service subsidy. Should any communities be affected by the outcomes of our service review, we will be closely working with and engaging in those areas, but I want to assure residents that whatever the outcome of the reviews, they will not be left without access to essential services such as food shopping and healthcare. The position that the council finds itself financially is dire in the future years. When we've had proposals to actually put this off for a year and put £1 million into the budget, I can't see, just all we're doing is putting it off for a year, and the actual expenses will get higher and higher over the next year. We need to look at this now. It is not sustainable at the present growth that we have. What we do see is low passenger numbers. They're not high at all. We've lost passengers to the pre-COVID numbers. You'll see your buses going round locally, and there are very, very few people on them. If only people would use the buses, we would be more sustainable. Commercial services would be more sustainable, and we need those passenger numbers to rise. But at the present time, we are not seeing that rise. What I want to do now is to implore our MPs in Leicestershire to look at this. This is affecting their residents. They need to get a grip, to look at the finances that they give to this county council, the government that they serve, the people, the community of Leicestershire that they serve. We need at Leicestershire County Council funding, fair funding. We've been asking for this for years of all political persuasions of government. It is now time to bite the bullet and fund Leicestershire so that we can properly service our residents. Thank you, Leader.
So we've got a recommendation which I presume you moved.
I formally move the recommendation, Leader.
Thank you. I'll formally second them. But before I go to Blake, I mean, £40,000 to £200,000 a route, it's not only not sustainable. In all honesty, if I was given money by the government to subsidise a bus route for £200,000, I would really struggle to justify that to a man or a woman on the street, that one bus route can have a £200,000 subsidy. If I had £200,000 spare, in all honesty, I'd probably spend it on adults or children, or filling more potholes, or doing some of the stuff I get pestered about. So, I mean, I understand that we've got to make these savings and look at the routes in the longer term and see which ones we can afford to subsidise. But £200,000 a year for a bus route it's unjustifiable to a man or woman on the street. And to emphasise that the problem is exactly as Ozzy said: passenger numbers down 25%, costs with inflation and Putin's war in Ukraine up 35%, and then to cap it all now, since COVID, we can't get the blessed drivers. You know, so that makes it even worse. So I'm happy to second what Ozzy's moved. No decisions yet, but if you look at it rationally, we're going to have to do something. Can I go to Blake now, please?
Thank you, Leader. And I support the motion, and I support what the lead members said. I was the previous lead member when having to put through the previous policy in 2018, and I know how difficult the policy was to move back then. So I just wanted to add to the debate. I've been contacted by a resident in Fleckney during the past week who's concerned about the bus removals and the issue around buses. The problem is one of demand. It's a use it or lose it partly. And it strikes me that we negotiate travel packs with developers, and the central argument with this particular resident is there's been a lot of development in Fleckney over the last 5 years, decade, and yet we're getting less bus services. And in spite of the travel packs that are negotiated with developers, unfortunately, the demand still isn't there. There's a low take-up of those bus passes within those travel packs. So I just wondered whether, if those monies aren't spent, those Section 106 monies aren't spent in relation to those travel packs, and therefore we end up having to pass that money back to the developers, is there any way of using that money earmarked for bus passes and diverting that into direct subsidy of bus routes in those particular areas that are subject to large development?
Here, if it's all right, I'll respond to Mr. Payne on that. Fundamentally, and that comes under obviously our developer contributions. In terms of buses, we have three kind of areas. We'll do the travel pack, which is about obviously there when new residents come in, here's your options, you know, there's a bus, you know, active travel, etc. And often it includes a free bus pass for a set period of time, etc. We will also, if merited, be requesting a subsidy for a bus service, say for 3 years or 5 years, etc. And we'll also, and it was referred to in Mr. Galton's submission, require some perhaps capital investment, like, you know, bus stop, etc., linked to a bus stop, that kind of thing, bus shelters. So the issue you're raising, the very valid one about there's often the lack of demand, we can ask for a subsidy for a bus route. Now, bear in mind, you know, roughly one bus and driver would cost something like 150,000, etc. If you have a high frequency, you're going to need more than one vehicle. We put those, or those services are put on for a fixed period of time. If they are not commercial by the end of the agreed 3-year, 5-year, whatever the period was, that bus service will go. But it reflects the fact that the development, the generation from the development, the demand hasn't been there for the bus service. In terms of the amount of money for the bus pass, not the bus pass, but the package, you know, you get to the residents, that's relatively low. And yes, we are actually reviewing better ways of using that, but actually it would go nowhere near enough to subsidise a bus service. It's just not in the same kind of quantum at all. We are reviewing so we get best effect out of that, but actually wouldn't solve your problem of put that money and divert it into a bus service. We request a bus service where needed, and if it's not, you know, financially viable at the end of the set term, unfortunately it goes, but that reflects on the level of usage from that community.
Louise.
Thank you. I don't think we can support buses to the subsidies we're running at the moment. And we did have a bus route in our area where they agreed to keep it running for another year to you know, to review it. People were told, well, use it or lose it, and they didn't use the bus. They just want buses there just in case, and that's not a commercial option. We have in our area, we have got demand response transport around the Foss villages and in Lubbersthorpe, and actually it does seem to be working very well. There are teething problems when you set anything up, but on the whole, it's linking through, and then people can go to a hub spot and get on the bus if they want to go into Leicester or whatever. So I think a lot of the time it's the thought of changing and having no bus route, but we've said we won't leave people without transportation. So I think we have to go this way, unfortunately.
Thank you, Louise. Deborah.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of points from me. I think we need to be aware as well that this is a national issue and it's not unique to Leicestershire. Just passenger numbers have just not gone back up to what they were pre-COVID. I think that's due to people working from home, changing in lifestyles and things like that. So I agree with those earlier comments that, you know, if people are not using the buses, we can't afford to just have them running around empty, and that's not good for the climate either. So I think that all ties into one, and there are examples within the county of really good demand response transport that has worked for residents and probably worked a lot better from buses. And just picking up the point that Blake's made about subsidised service, there was one in one of my villages that was subsidised for 5 years, and I did actually apply for a travel back and get the free pass. But my problem was that the bus was so unreliable. So in the end, I just gave up using my free bus pass, and I'd rather pay for a service that was actually good. So I think the bus companies need to step up a little bit as well. And if we're got developers money to subsidise a service for 5 years, they need to work really hard to build that up to a commercial level. If they don't run a reliable service, people are not going to use it. So I think, there is a role for the bus companies here to ensure that they deliver a reliable service for the funding that they've got. So I am going to support this issue. I know it's going to be really difficult for some people that may use that bus service, but I think it's what Louisa said, it's that fear of change. And I think sometimes demand response transport is better than the bus that they had before because it's unreliable. So I think there's several factors here that we will work our way through as we go through this review. So I do support it.
Okay, so moved by Ozzy, seconded by me. The proposed motion is A, B and C. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. 7, the outcome of consultation on eligibility for care technology services 371 to 392. It's recommended that from April 1st, any requests for repairs and maintenance for legacy equipment provided by care technology services considered as part of a care and support assessment review. We've got comments in from Michael, a different one this time, Charlesworth. These are attached at 7. We've got John here, Director of Adults and Communities. And then Christine will come in after John. Okay, John, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. The new care technology service was approved for go live by Cabinet in April 2022, and the new service now offers a range of equipment that's provided free of charge to people who are assessed as being eligible under the Care Act. The new service has proved highly successful since its launch, with much higher levels of demand than were originally planned, which includes over 1,400 referrals and over 2,000 pieces of equipment installed within the first 10 months. However, the council also has over 8,000 items of older legacy equipment that was previously provided on a universal discretionary basis by the former assistive technology service, and particularly to people who are deaf or hearing impaired. Since the launch of the new service, we have continued to respond to requests for repairs and maintenance of the old legacy equipment, but capacity issues mean that doing so is impacting on the service's ability to install new equipment, and it's not sustainable as demand increases. It's therefore proposed that requests for repair and maintenance of legacy equipment be considered in the future as part of a full care and support review, and that consideration of such requests be assessed by reference to eligibility under the Care Act to ensure fairness across the service. A public consultation to that effect was held in November and December of 2022, online on the council's website, but also a letter was sent to the 1,130 people who previously used the care technology service for legacy equipment since 2018. The letter was also sent to the main organisations which specifically support deaf and hard of hearing communities to seek their views, and an offer was made to attend and explain the consultation to local groups, but this offer wasn't taken up. A letter was received from the British Deaf Association expressing concern from some of their members, and an offer has been made to meet with members of the British Deaf Association to provide details of the consultation, but to date no response has been received. The findings of the consultation are detailed in Appendix A of this report and summarised at paragraphs 31 to 47. The response to the consultation led to 4 options being considered. The first option was to continue to provide the service for users of legacy equipment using the existing resources within the care technology service. The option is considered to be unsustainable, as it would create a 2-tier system whereby some people would be receiving the service on a universal basis and others would require eligibility. In addition, replacement equipment would need to be purchased at an estimated additional cost of £110,000. A second option was considered, whereby the council would provide services for users of legacy equipment, but recruit additional resources to manage the demand. In addition to the disadvantages of the first option, this additional resource requirement would be in the region of £180,000. Third option was considered where we could outsource the provision of repairs and maintenance. That would allow for the Care Technology Service to focus on people who are eligible on the new service. However, the disadvantage would be that it would require additional budget to cover contract and provider management, in addition to the costs that we would have to incur in terms of the equipment itself. So the fourth option, and that one being proposed today, is to align the criteria of the legacy equipment with the new Care Technology offer, whereby requests for repairs and maintenance would be considered as part of the Care Act review and subject to Care Act eligibility. Those not meeting the eligibility criteria will be signposted to other available support. Many of the legacy devices are available from consumer sites at very low cost, and devices could easily be sourced and replaced where they are found to be beyond economic repair. Comments from the Adults and Scrutiny Committee who received a report are contained at paragraph 49 of today's report. And we've also included commentary on the Council's public sector equality duty within the report at paragraphs 50 to 59 and at Appendix B. The duty requires the Council to have due regard to the needs to eliminate discrimination and advance equality of opportunity between groups of persons who share relevant characteristics. Cabinet should therefore properly have due regard to the impact on those people who have historically received a discretionary service but may no longer do so in the future. Moving from a universal offer to one based on eligibility will be unpopular with those who have received it previously. However, it is considered that providing repairs and maintenance of legacy equipment as part of the care and support assessment review and subject to eligibility criteria is a fairer way of providing resources and enabling the Council to target those people who are in most need. So where a person is assessed as having eligible care and support needs, and where Care Technology can help, the service will continue to be provided for them. And where a person is assessed as not having eligible needs, they will be signposted to other forms of support. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Christine?
Thank you, John, for that. I think you've fully covered everything. And thank Mr. Charlesworth for his comments. We have to look at the policy and support those residents who are in receipt of certain benefits and be fair to those residents who aren't. Disappointing that none of the invites that we sent out, from the blind and deaf people didn't come forward to listen to what we were saying. And I'd like to formally pass this recommendation, approve this recommendation.
Thank you. Louise?
And I'd second the recommendation. I would just say that considering the amount of people that were aware of the consultation, it's a shame that only a small amount returned. And I would say to the public that we go out to consultation because we do want them to input into some of these big decisions. So I would urge public to take notice of some of these consultations and please feed back to us.
Very good. Moved by Christine. Microphone off, Christine. Seconded by Louise. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, John. 8, Armed Forces Act 2021, pages 393 to 402. It's an update on progress made towards addressing the implications of the new Armed Forces Act. We've got Zafar here. Zafar's Head of Communities, Policy and Resilience. And then I'll go to you, Pam. Zafar, good morning.
Well, good morning, Leader. As the report indicates that the opening section A, the Act became law in November 2022. So it places now a statutory duty on public bodies such as the Council to have due regard to the needs of armed forces community in 3 areas. Some of the areas are direct responsibility of the local authorities such as education, others are partnership arrangements such as housing and healthcare. So we'll be discharging these duties with most of our statutory partners. The Act itself will operate in a very similar way to the Equality Act 2010. So operationally, what we've attempted to do as officers is incorporate this particular legislation in existing work streams and existing business as usual activity for a number of reasons. First of all, it reduces clearly the work stream and the workload, but also it embeds it within existing policy and practice, which I think is the best way to proceed. The new duty complements existing work that the council has been leading on for a number of years, in particular the Armed Forces Covenant and also the Ministry of Defence Employee Recognition Scheme, where we currently have been awarded gold status. The appendix to the actual report itself shows the different areas that we've been progressing over the last 3 to 4 months, and these included making sure that if anyone does contact us who's a reservist, a veteran, or has had any connection with the armed forces, that they are initially identified so that we can then assess their needs and then direct them to the appropriate services, whether there are services or partner services. Secondly, we've been looking at our admissions policy within the education department, and we've made sure that's up to date and recognises these new responsibilities. We've also, whilst we're not directly a housing provider, we do have some duties in terms of homelessness and housing, and we've set up referral pathways with our district colleagues. We've also revisited our employment policies and procedures to make sure that they are fair and equitable and there's no discrimination within there. And where possible, we've introduced positive action programs as well to encourage recruitment and then retention of anyone who's currently a reservist. And then finally, we've established a dedicated website which has now gone live, and I'd invite cabinet members to view that and also to signpost that to anyone that is interested in the local community. The final thing to note is that we anticipate this is the start of a process. So whilst I've mentioned education, healthcare and housing, we expect the duty to be expanded into potentially adult social care and children's social care. So as that information becomes better known, there'll be further updates being brought forward to the relevant bodies of the council. Thank you, Leader.
Sounds like good work, Zafar. Pam?
Thank you. Leicester County Council, we've got a proud history of supporting our armed forces community. We first signed the Armed Forces Covenant in 2013 and again strengthened our commitment to this in 2018, cementing our status as a forces-friendly service provider and employer. This has been demonstrated since 2020 by our recognition from the MOD as a Gold Award holder in the Employee Recognition Scheme, one of only a small number of organisations across the country to hold this honour. As such, I welcome the Act as it puts into law a range of policy issues sitting under the Covenant umbrella that we as an authority have been working towards over these years, with the express purpose to ensure our forces families do not face disadvantage due to their service. We hope with the plans and changes highlighted in this report to be not just compliant with the new legislation, but maintain a level of commitment that will also future-proof us for any additions to the Act which may happen in the future. We will continue to ensure our legal obligations are met with regard to housing, education and healthcare, as well as employment, as Zafar has already explained, whilst also continuing our wider programme of work supporting the other elements of the Covenant Pledge. I am honoured to be the Armed Forces lead member and champion, and am pleased to propose this report to Cabinet.
Yeah, thank you for that, Pam. You do a good job. Deborah?
I'm very happy to second this proposal. I think it's really important for this council to ensure that we treat all our armed forces personnel and their families really well, and that we operate under the covenant that we've signed. And I was really pleased to see that the action plan contains a lot of green already, so we're well on our way to implementing all the actions under the new Armed Forces Act 2021.
Okay. Moved by Pam, seconded by Deborah. All in favour, please show. Thank you. 9, interim approach to planning issues in Charnwood Borough, pages 403 to 352, sets out the proposed interim approach to securing developer contributions and managing development in respect of highways and education needs in Charnwood Borough, pending the adoption of its local plan. Got Julie Thomas here today. She's the head of planning. She'll present. Then I'll go to Ozzy to speak in his role as lead member for highway matters. Julie.
Thank you, Leader. As members are aware, Charnwood Borough Council doesn't have an up-to-date local plan and it can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. In these circumstances, the tilted balance applies, where there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development irrespective of the planning status of the site. This has led to a number of planning permissions being granted by the Borough Council and also at appeal for development, and there are a number of other sites coming through the pipeline. While Section 106 contributions continue to be sought on a site-by-site basis, it's difficult to secure contributions to mitigate the cumulative impacts of development. And it's proposed to introduce this interim policy to address this situation. The policy will remain in place until the adoption of the Charnwood Borough local plan, and Charnwood Borough Council are supportive of this approach.
Thank you, Julie. Ozzy.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I fully support what our position is with regarding the Charnwood local plan. We really do need to see a local plan in place with proper infrastructure being put in place. Highways are struggling with their finances, but we want to make sure that the roads are put in place by planners in the first place to make sure that the communities can get from place to place, but proper roads. We need proper infrastructure, and we don't need bits and bits of here and bits of there of planning. We want substantial planning with proper infrastructure putting forward. So I'm happy to move this, Leader.
And I'm happy to second it, because I think people are more accepting of planning applications if they're beautiful places with the proper infrastructure, not boxes on spine roads. Peter?
Thank you, Leader.
I'll formally second. Sorry, I forgot that.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I think your introduction about the consequences of not having a local plan for Charnwood, equally apply across the county, particularly my patch where I represent in Hinckley and Bosworth, which still hasn't got its local plan in place. I think they've been working on it since 2019, but are still kicking the can down the road for another year yet, as I understand it. And I think it just reiterates the point that Ozzy made that, without these plans in place, we do have these speculative applications where the infrastructure just isn't in place or can't be planned to be put in place to take these things forward. I know particularly in the area that I represent, we've got a number of applications, Kirby Road in Desford, and also Hunts Lane that are coming up, where because of the failure of the local Borough Council to get its local plan in place, the local residents really are at the behest of these speculative applications. And so I really do implore the Borough Councils across the county to get these plans in place. And I do know the County Council has been working hard. I raised this a number of times at Cabinet, and I do know that the County Council has been working hard with the Borough Councils to support them to get their plans in place. So, as Ozzy says, it's in all of our interests for these issues to be resolved, because, I would hope that none of us are NIMBYs and that we accept that development has to take place, but if it does have to take place, it should be in a planned and structured fashion that the infrastructure is there to support it. Thank you.
Deborah's next.
Just to obviously declare that I am a member of Charnwood Borough Council before I speak, but I'm just speaking about schools really in education, and we need a plan in place for all these speculative little sites that keep coming through, because we can't just keep adding to our little village schools that are very small and contained with, we know, 10 places here and 10 places there. We need to take that impact across the whole place to make sure that we've got enough school places for these people that are moving into these new developments. So I will be supporting this interim policy.
Christine, you're next.
Thank you. I've already declared that I'm a member of Charnwood Borough Council, and I support what Deborah said. We're having a lot of houses in my area, Shepshed, and we do need to make sure that we've got a school to accommodate this extra one. But one of my concerns is that sometimes we get the highways agreed for the development to go ahead, and then we get the builder coming along and asking for the what was said on the S106 for not to go ahead. And as you know, I've keep writing to your section saying that we have got concerns that yes, part of the application was that they've got to improve this, they've got to provide that. The developer gets the permission and then says, well, it's not feasible. Well, in the first place, if they hadn't agreed to it, they wouldn't have got the planning permission. So we're going round and round in circles. But we do need to make sure that we get the highways and the schools and other and doctors and everything available when we're having all these new houses, and we're getting a lot in Shepshed. And I am aware that Deborah and other areas are getting a lot of houses. Thank you. I should be supporting it.
Very good, Christine. Richard?
I've of course declared interest in this earlier on. I just particularly want to support Christine, the last point there about contributions that are promised should be delivered.
Indeed. Well, this policy will help us with areas, well, in Charnwood, where they haven't got a local plan. So it's been moved by Ozzy, seconded by me. Can we all vote in favour, please? Thank you very much. 10, another local plan. Response to the City of Leicester Local Plan 2020 to 2036. This is the submission of the draft consultation. It's on 533 to 542. Over to you, Julie, again.
Thank you, Leader. The Reg 19 local plan for the City of Leicester is now out for consultation. It's out for consultation between the 16th of January and the 27th of February. There's no real change between the Reg 19 and the Reg 18 plan, which we've previously commented on, but there is more emphasis on maximising brownfield sites in the central area. Service areas have all been consulted on the plan and it's generally considered to be sound, but there are some highways and education issues where we think there's opportunities to improve cross-boundary and cumulative impacts of development. The paper highlights the broad support for the plan, but seeks delegated authority to submit our full response by the 27th of February to allow continuing discussions with the City Council, which to date have proven to be fruitful.
Can I just ask you, I'm happy to move the motion, Julie. Can I just ask you, on the city's numbers, obviously the city's local plan depends on, as far as I can make out, the unsatisfiable need being satisfied by the borough and district councils. As far as I'm aware, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, 5 of the borough councils have signed up to take the city's undeliverable housing numbers. I alleged to me that 2 have not. So what happens to the city's local plan if 2 of the boroughs won't take the unmet need from the city?
You're quite correct. There's about 18,000 units that aren't able to be accommodated within the city. There is a statement of common ground between most of the Leicestershire authorities saying how they will appropriate that need into their own districts and boroughs. Hinckley and Bosworth haven't signed, and we have no idea if and when they are going to sign. And Harborough have said they won't sign until after the elections. If they don't sign up to the statement of common ground, then we'd have to look to how we apportion their share of the unmet need amongst the other boroughs and districts, which is why it's important for the plans coming forward to have a trigger policy within them to ensure that an early review can take place if for any reason we can't get that agreement. So yes, the city's plan could be found unsound and fail because it's not addressing housing need.
Can I just further ask you that? It seems most unfair. I mean, I represent North West. I know we've signed up because I put my hand up for it. So we can sign up, and if the other 2 don't, they will then have to, the other 5 will have to take the numbers that Hinckley and Harborough either are not taking or refusing to take. And in Charnwood would expect them then to have a trigger policy in their local plan just in case. And as far as I'm aware, that there isn't a trigger policy.
There is a trigger policy. Charnwood are looking to amend that trigger policy, and we're currently in discussions as boroughs and districts over the wording of those amendments, which will be presented to the examination which is ongoing at the moment. But yes, under the current system, it's likely that the existing boroughs who are signed up to the Statement of Common Ground will need to take more housing numbers. However, under the changes that are proposed through the MPPF and the LERB, there isn't that requirement.
Okay, I won't question anymore because I've got other people.
I think so. Well, I've got there first. Thank you, Chairman and Leader. Yes, you asked the question that I was going to ask, because Charnwood are currently going through their local plan, so it might need to be a slight amendment. But one of my concerns is that if the city can't take the houses now, going down the line, they're not going to be able to take any more houses. So, in near future, that all the boroughs around it or in Leicestershire are going to have to take extra houses to accommodate what the city should take. And I think it was earlier this week, it said that the Leicester City had sold some of their land to Walker's Crisps so that they could extend their factory. So is there any way that they can do that but then not meet the need of the housing that they're supposed to meet? I'm just asking something. I'm not on the city or anything. I'm just asking if they can sell off land when they could have provided houses on it.
What tends to happen now is we look at housing market areas. So the city's obviously expanded its boundaries in terms of its housing market area. But yes, there could definitely be a situation in the future where the city and perhaps Oldby and Wigston, which is also very constrained, can't meet their housing requirement. And in terms of the employment land question, there is usually a need to meet employment land requirements as well as housing requirements. So it's a case of balancing the two.
I'm going to go to Deborah first, Richard, because Deborah got to second something. We're a type of chatting at the moment rather than debating. Deborah.
Yeah, I'll second the proposal that's come forward. And my concern was about the Statement of Common Ground and the lack that Hinckley and Bosworth and Harborough haven't signed yet. I think we are heading to a perfect storm very soon, I think, because if it doesn't get agreed, then it's going to make all the districts and the city's local plans unsound, and we'll end up in a right mess across the whole of Leicestershire and Leicester. So I think there are real concerns leading forward, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when the consultations finished with the government about the new rules that are going to come in. But we can't build where there isn't space, and you can't put houses on the moon, can you? So if we haven't got the space, we haven't got the space. So there has to be something done, because we can't continue as we are, especially within my area, just building and building and just having concrete blocks everywhere with no green space. So I will look forward with interest, but I think we are leading into a difficult time.
Thank you. I've got Richard, then you, Lee. Richard.
You asked my question, Chairman. It's already been answered. You asked my question.
Sorry about that, Richard.
No, thank you for asking it, Chairman. You saved my breath.
Lee, and then Ozzy.
Thank you, Chair. It was just the paragraph 31. It lists where they're going to look to build some of their need, and it lists places like Western Park Golf Course, which is obviously in my division, and it's the infrastructure issues. I mean, I'd like to think that for all those areas like Thurmaston and Glenfield where there are proposals planned, there are opposition to those proposals, but I'd like to think basically on infrastructure itself that the infrastructure is full at the moment. It's fully loaded. And there's just no way that we could or we should be supporting some of these proposals. The Western Part was designed, set out for housing, but they've now added a recycling waste centre on there as well, and some other facilities which just don't meet that sort of our current infrastructure going into the city. So I think the bordering areas need to be looked at quite carefully by our highways, and whether we should be supporting the local plan or putting negative comments to that and objecting. I think that's certainly what I'd like to see, but locally there's a swell of support where people are objecting to it on quite a large scale, but whether that voice is heard, we'll wait to see.
Ozzy, you're next. You're from Hinckley Bosworth. Perhaps you can help us out.
I'd like to declare an interest, obviously now speaking as a member of Hinckley and Bosworth also. What concerns me is if we don't get these local plans in place, we're going to have a real big problem. Hinckley and Bosworth have had their plan delayed another year. And what really does concern me is the amount of speculative development that's being passed by the borough. We need to get a plan in place urgently. And we've just been, behind the times trying to get to where we need to get. In my community alone, we're suffering. We've had on one road alone, we've had 350 houses been built, really. One of them against an inspector's decision when we refused it, and even a High Court judge refused it. But because they're in such a mess, they're past it. So really, I really want to make sure that we do get. Each borough gets their fair share, but also, make sure they get the plan in place so that we can actually have a proper planned-led development and infrastructure for highways.
Suggest you come to Northwest. We're up to date. Right, so it's been moved by myself and seconded by Deborah, which is the response to the consultation. Are we all happy? Thank you very much. 11. Leicestershire's policy on admissions to mainstream schools, determination of admissions arrangements, pages 543 to 614. I think I'll go straight over to you, Jane. You know all about this, don't you? You ready?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval of the revised Leicestershire school admissions policy from September 2024. The school admissions policy sets out the council admission arrangements for the purposes of allocated school places for schools within Leicestershire for those schools that the council is admissions authority for. The current admissions policy was approved by Cabinet in February 2022. Since that time, the Office of the Schools Adjudicator did challenge us on our admissions policy around two areas, one around a general lack of clarity in terms of Crown servants featuring as a priority, but also around the clarity around feeder schools as well not being named. The recommendations that were made by the schools adjudicator as part of their investigation have now been reflected in the revised policy. In relation to the oversubscription criteria, Leicestershire is no longer responsible for maintained secondary schools, so they've all now moved to become academies. So the oversubscription criteria and the policy that's attached now only provides the criteria for maintained and voluntary controlled primary schools. And that's the criteria that sets out how applications are ranked where there are more applicants for school places than we have school places. The other change that we've made arises from the Armed Forces Covenant that's been absorbed now into the policy to ensure that we're compliant when receiving an application for a child whose parent is in the armed forces. There's no requirement for us to consult on the revisions of the policy as the changes can be adopted and not statutory. Oh, sorry, they are statutory, so we've no need to consult. So I'll move to recommendations that the school admissions policy be approved.
Good. Deborah?
Nothing more to add. So Jane's covered it all, I think, very clearly. It's just a routine thing that we go through. So I'm happy to support the proposals on the order paper.
Very good. Ozzy?
I'm happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Good. No speakers. All in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. County Council's representative on the East Midlands Freeport Board. It used to be me. There's no paper for this item. Cabinet was April 22. The Cabinet resolved that the Council will become a member of the Freeport Board. I was nominated to serve on the East Midlands Freeport Board as the leader of the council. As you know, I've resigned from the board because a lot of the areas in my division, and Lee Brecken, Cabinet Member for Resources, will be taking my place. Since the membership of the board confers a directorship of the Freeport Board, it is appropriate that this change in membership now is proposed is formally recognised. So it's more of a formal affair. We'd better note that Peter isn't a. Do you want to say something, Peter?
Yes, right. Just to declare an interest in this item.
Yeah.
My employer, Severn Trent, also has representation on the Freeport Board.
You got that, Matthew? So, Richard, you're going to move something. I'm not going to do anything because I'm a resigning member. Richard?
I move the motion, Chairman.
Deborah?
I'll second the motion.
Have a show of hands in favour. I won't vote at all. and Peter won't vote because he's conflicted. Okay, that's passed. Thank you very much. 13, items referred from overview and scrutiny. There are none. Item 14, any items which I think are urgent, and there are none. So that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.